So I just had some design meetings earlier this month with my team, which is quite a wonderful team of artists. Some people who I've worked with here before, like Sybil Wickersheimer. We worked on The Unfortunates together, and now get to do Julius Caesar, of a play as different as one can imagine, but actually with some real similarities. One of the things that Sybil and I have been talking about in terms of the set and the world that feels quite reminiscent of The Unfortunates actually is the range of humanity and mystery to the world, that it is a civilization that is very much a human one, and yet it is being sort of overtaken by this sense of mystery and strangeness, and then also just unruliness of nature that seems to be an expression of the psychological unrest and dis-ease of this community. And so we're really excited to figure out, how do you tell that story theatrically? How do you take this massive epic storm that starts at the beginning of the play and builds to a frequency that ultimately becomes seemingly sort of too big to contain and erupts in what is the violent assassination of Caesar. There's all of these moments that come up in the text of mysterious, strange things that are happening within the city. There's a lioness that gives birth in the middle of the street. There's people walking through on fire. You almost feel like it's in this a city in the midst of a waking nightmare at times, which I think is one of the other things that sort of took us back to The Unfortunates. And so we've been also talking about, how do we find potent little flickers of, again, this sense of mystery, the sense of the metaphysical that is always present in this world, that it's a world that listens to omens and seers and soothsayers, and there are ghosts that exist in this world, again, The Unfortunates, and that it is a world where we ignore dreamers and dreams at our peril. And so how to allow that to exist both in a place of deep humanity and civilization, and then also honor the kind of mythic, epic aspects of the metaphysical that Shakespeare is clearly, purposely bringing into play in terms of the story. And so we've started talking about a landscape that is stripped, sparse, elemental. What are the simple, significant things that we need to tell the story that can help give a sense of what this civilization is, but in an elemental, gestural sort of way? Because then that feels like a language that can morph into more poetic expressions of the not just physical but psychological warfare that happen over the course of the play. I think so much of the play, in a way, is the nightmare that happens in Brutus's experience when he ultimately chooses violence, and then the world begins to morph and shift, and we really want a design for the world that can go from being realistic and pedestrian to poetic and dreamlike, in the way that our imaginations do, in the way that Brutus's mind does. I think by the time we get to the Civil War of the latter part of the play, we want to feel the way in which that Civil War is an expression of the psychological ruin of Brutus, versus the assassination that happens early on in the play, that is quite realistic, that is written as a stabbing of Caesar by many, many people. And in a way, the most powerful way to do that, I think, is just do that, do the stabbing of a man by 10 people, and just simply do that realistically, honor the horror of that literal action, and then find a way that realistic violent action can evolve into something that is more poetic but equally visceral, that can help tell the story of this larger disease of violence that is infecting us as a human race. One of the thrilling opportunities in this play in production, I think, is how you tell the story of this physical violence. And we've decided to have that grow out of both a realistic place, as I was talking about with assassination, but then also creating a unique theatrical vocabulary that is a more poetic expression of this violence, and that can grow out of a language that is part dance, part combat. So the people building this with me, one of whom is Erica Chong-Shook, who's a choreographer, a brilliant choreographer from the Bay Area. She's going to be coming to OSF for the first time to work with me and the fight director. And I'm excited to build a vocabulary that can get at the cost of this violence, the real physical cost and also psychological cost, in a visceral way, that we feel the cost from the actors, in a way that we can feel that in our guts, in our bones, and therefore can require a greater, deeper conversation. And I think also creating this unique theatrical vocabulary will help us create the bridge from a realistic vocabulary of violence at the beginning of the play to the poetic, more epic sense of violence that happens in Act 5 when that all gives way to a civil war. And I think, that's such an impossible thing to create on stage, a civil war, and it's an invitation, I think, in fact, to find a creative theatrical solution. And there's no better way to do that than to have brilliant collaborators, I think. So we'll be working together with a group of actors this fall, which I'm really excited about, to create that vocabulary, and hopefully something that has a kind of muscularity and rigor that matches the incredible muscularity and rigor of this text.